Okay, so now we are going to talk about pain versus pleasure. I just recently read Tony Robbins' book, Awaken the Giant Within. And it was a little bit of a different philosophy from what I'm used to, hearing and understanding. And so I've started doing some research on it. Recently was given a very huge gift by a friend of mine of some very valuable training information that Tony Robbins has done. So I'll be sharing that as we move forward. But basically, Tony Robbins' theory is that everything that we do is stems either from trying to avoid pain or trying to gain pleasure. Everything. No matter what it is that we're doing, there is that connection. It's either a pain or a pleasure connection. Now, from prior training that I have done, I have learned that people will do more to avoid pain than they will to gain pleasure. It's because we're programmed that way from the time that we're little, right? It's all the, don't do this, don't do that, be careful, don't fail, you got to get good grades. So there's so much negative association, to consequences and consequences being negative. That we work really hard, not necessarily because we want to get the A, but we want to avoid the F. And so that's a lot of how we're programmed. So when we procrastinate, we're procrastinating because the pain of doing it seems more than the pleasure of getting it done. But at some point that shifts. So think about today is April 15th, so tax day here in America. And so a lot of people, they avoid doing their taxes because it seems like a painful, cumbersome process. And I don't want to do it. And then all of a sudden, April rolls around, and in this last week, I've had several people, comment to me or send me messages saying, oh, I got to get my taxes done, because now the pain of not doing the taxes becomes more powerful than the pain of doing them. Because then there's consequences if you do those taxes late, and you get penalties and other things that are associated with it. So then we have the mindset shift, and as we have the mindset shift, that's really what spurs us into action, is because where that pain is going to be has changed. Have you ever found yourself procrastinating doing things?
Yeah.
And why? What's the driving force behind the procrastination?
Because there's something more fun to do.
Right. So pleasure, right? I'd rather do pleasure than something that is perceived as being painful. I mastered the art of procrastination over this past week, I have to say. I became an expert at it. And it was really only yesterday realizing that, oh gosh, it's Friday and I've really accomplished not one productive thing all week, or almost not one productive thing all week, that finally spurred me into action and said, okay, I really got to get going and get some things done. So they say if you're going to do things, give it your all and do it well. And I did really well procrastinating this week. What can I say? I excelled at it. And really, when it comes down to it, why was I procrastinating? Because I had so many things that I needed to do. I felt overwhelmed by them, and I was having this internal conflict. And so therefore, rather than, and I was having, guilty feelings over spending time on one thing versus time on another. And so as I had this internal conflict going on, what really happened? Nothing. I got nothing done. I didn't get what I wanted to do done. I didn't get what I didn't want to do done. I didn't get anything done. And so it's just being able to understand where we're coming from, so that then we can kind of pull ourselves by the seat of the pants and get up out of that place and then move forward. So what Tony says is that if we want to change habits, then what we should do is associate extreme pleasure with the habit that we want to that we want to exchange. So he gives the example that he had gained some weight at some point in his life, and he said that he was always taught he had to finish all the food on his plate. I completely relate to that because my mother was born in the time of the Great Depression, and food was really hard for them to come by. They had to go to the black market to get it, and so from her perspective, if we left food on our plate, then it was like a sin. And she just, absolutely did not want to see food left on the plate. And God forbid if that food got thrown out. Because she had really deep paradigms set based on how she was raised and experiences that she had in younger life. So Tony said that what he started doing was, he said he bought bigger plates, so he was eating more. And the next thing you know, he'd put on some extra weight. So what he started to do was he would only eat half of the food on the plate, and then he would push the plate away, and then he would immediately engage with a really positive activity. So maybe like, dancing or singing to rap music or, I don't know, whatever it was. It was really positive. And that you can associate pleasure with habits simply by doing the first step, but then immediately following it with something pleasurable, because our brain's going to make the association between the pleasure and that action. Even if they're not necessarily associated, if we do them simultaneously, boom, boom, then our brain is going to make that connection so that then we're able to start associating that as being a pleasurable thing.
Eating an apple and playing video games.
Eating an apple and playing video games. There you go. It's the positive, and it's kind of strange, but he gives an example in his book of, like, say, a woman has a really terrible day at work and she's in an awful mood, and she comes home and now her husband greets her and she's still in a foul mood, and so now she's foul towards everything that he's saying to her, even though he's not saying a single thing wrong. But what happens is her brain then makes the association between a foul mood and her husband. Because she carried that mood home with her. And so if she doesn't stop it right away and say, no, wait a minute, I don't want this association, the brain's going to latch onto it. It's going to make that association. Another example is my ex-husband. When we were first married, he had gotten a terrible, terrible stomach virus. And it was actually something he had picked up when we were out of the country. But he came down with it right after I had made wings. And so for years he wouldn't eat wings because he associated wings with this viral illness that he had, even though the wings had nothing to do with it. He just made that association because it was it was a day after he had eaten those that he had started coming down with the symptoms of the viral illness. And I mean, he was sick with it for months. But it was... that's how the associations get made. So think about it. What associations can you think of that you have made in the past that maybe they weren't necessarily associated, but you kind of put the two and two together?
It's a loaded question.
Yeah. Well, just, think about it and just be aware of that. Really try to, over the, course of the next couple of days, think about how you're making those associations and become aware of them. Because those associations are really powerful. And if we can align the behaviors and the habits, with that we want with then positive reinforcement, we're going to get a lot farther in being able to achieve those and accomplish those. So that's really, important as we are thinking about the connection between pain and pleasure, and that every single thing we do, we're doing either to gain pleasure or to avoid pain.